Okay, so my paper is titled Man as a Territorial Animal in the Writings of Roger Scruton. If, as Aristotle said, man is a political animal, then he is also a territorial animal. Any polis has physical boundaries, and Aristotle spends some time on the politics talking about the best geographical environment for a city, its physical layout, and the size of its population. Modern philosophers have tended to abstract their concepts of the best city and its formation from considerations of its physical environment, scope, and size. But Roger Scruton resembled Aristotle in his attention to the concrete territorial character of the political community. Though he was concerned with the nation-state rather than the city-state, Scruton followed Aristotle in emphasizing the importance of citizens living together in the same place for a long time in order to form bonds of civic friendship. For much of the 19th and 20th centuries, conservatives were skeptical of the nation-state. They associated it with the centralization of power at the expense of localities. Advocates of the nation-state tended to be radical, seeking to displace traditional authorities. More recently, conservatives began to see the nation as a bulwark of national and local culture against rootless cosmopolitanism, economic globalization, and international political institutions. Scruton made an important contribution to the conservative appropriation of the nation-state as a force for conservation. And there are three themes of his defense of the contemporary nation-state concerning its territoriality that are worth our attention. First, that man is a territorial animal who seeks to build a common home with his neighbors. Second, that the jurisdiction of the nation-state is necessarily territorial. Subnational and transnational loyalties are a threat to it. And that is why, third, it is best for a nation to have a territorial religion. So, man is by nature a territorial creature, according to Scruton. We both adapt to our environment and shape it to our own purposes. Human beings have a natural love of shared place, manifesting itself politically in the nation-state. For Scruton, nationality, as distinct from nationalism, is a form of territorial attachment. He says it is also a proto-legislative arrangement that contains the seeds of sovereignty. The virtue by which we love our home Scruton calls oikophilia. He explains the love that we have for our country in terms that we use to characterize our individual households. We settle down not just with our immediate family, but with neighbors and our broader community. Scruton says that for the English, home was an island of mine in an ocean of ours. Their country and their neighborhood had the same comfortable familiarity as their household. In settling, we put down roots and attach ourselves to the land instead of merely residing in a random place. Residing means living someplace without having made it our permanent home. We may have made a financial investment in our residence, but we are not morally and emotionally invested in it, nor do we have relations with our neighbors. Modern development is characterized, Scruton says, by individual plots scattered over a place that is no one's, instead of a community that is ours. Without a sense of possession, people will not take responsibility for the place they inhabit. And by detaching people from the land, Scruton says urbanization undermined the English sense of place and the very sense of what England is. Building a community entails building a shared environment with shared manners, architecture, and byways. In English, the word neighbor etymologically means one who builds nearby. Scruton says every building should be a fitting member of a community of neighbors. We want our homes to be beautiful, so it is natural to desire beautiful towns, which give rise to a shared aesthetic norms and a vernacular architecture. Shared aesthetic conventions give a place a sense of permanence. Scruton points to Gothic architecture, which can be found in churches, public buildings, and private homes as an example of a style that ties together a community aesthetically and enchants it. When land was enclosed in England, it was still kept open by common law rights of way that reconciled individual ownership with common settlement, so that byways would be continually shared. Hedges evolved into a living fence that keeps livestock in while beautifying the landscape and permitting neighbors passage over the land. To violate aesthetic norms is not just bad manners, but selfish and destructive of the shared aesthetic that makes our home beautiful and therefore destructive of community itself. We said that territorial attachment is a proto-legislative arrangement, according to Scruton, that gives rise to sovereignty. He says, theorists of the social contract write as though it presupposes only the first person singular of free rational choice. In fact, it presupposes a first person plural, in which the burdens of belonging have already been assumed. The formation of a nation with a government and laws presupposes the prior existence of a community with specific boundaries. Without a sense of shared membership in an already existing community, parties to a social contract would not be able to begin to consider how to govern themselves. Territorial settlement gives rise to political authority, which creates laws to govern the territory. The rule of law, in turn, facilitates trust among members of the nation, which makes it possible for people to view strangers as neighbors and fellow countrymen. In other words, the community that exists prior to the government forms the government, and then the government provides institutions and laws which strengthen and give further definition to the nation. Yeah, that doesn't count against my time, does it? There's a reciprocal relationship between the people who inhabit a territory and the state and laws they institute to govern themselves. The members of the nation must be committed both to the place they inhabit and the rules that govern them. They share responsibility to care for the observance of the rules that bind them together, holding each other and their government accountable to the law. Since they're based on shared adherence to impartial laws, unlike tribal or religious loyalties, national loyalties, Scruton says, can be multiple and can nest within each other without conflict because they're defined by territory. He says that one can be Scottish and British, or for that matter, Pakistani and British. And I quote, "Such examples illustrate the flexibility and openness of the national idea and the way in which local, tribal, religious, and ethnic loyalties can be co-opted to an ongoing project of nation building. The British experience therefore illustrates the way in which a composite national identity can be forged into a single jurisdiction, while also providing shelter to minorities who may as yet have no national loyalty at all, but whose children, it is hoped, will be brought up to acquire one." That's Scruton. It is precisely the solidity of the territorial jurisdiction that makes this possible, though. If the territorial jurisdiction were to be weakened, the nation's ability to nest or assimilate other loyalties would be called into question. National loyalty may fail to take root or may be undermined because of subnational tribal loyalty or transnational loyalty to an international governing body, whether political or religious. The value of territorial jurisdiction can be seen when it is contrasted with jurisdictions without acknowledged accountability to specific states. Scruton points out that national leaders tend to escape responsibility for government actions when they can outsource decision-making to transnational or international bodies. Such bodies lack accountability, either because they reject accountability to national jurisdictions or are remote enough to keep their operations obscure from outsiders. Transnational governance threatens the nation by undermining the accountability of nation-states to their peoples. Societies are naturally exclusive and assign rights and privileges to their members that they do not give to others. Rights in a nation-state are abstracted from considerations of religion or tribe. They treat citizens as equal members of the nation. The success of the nation-state depends on the displacement of bonds of clan and religion by bonds of law. But rights are only meaningful if there's an authority with a specific jurisdiction to enforce them. Universal rights are meaningless because there is no universal authority to enforce them. When specific rights are assigned to specific groups over specific resources and places, they will be better taken care of. Like Aristotle, Scruton says that we take better care of things that are ours when they are secure in our possession. He shows that specific legal rights to seas, rivers, and countryside help preserve them. When Britain and Denmark joined the EU, they had to give up jurisdiction over their territorial waters. Up to that point, they had conserved the common stock of fish in their territorial waters because the waters and the fish were theirs. But once those waters were open to all of Europe, they were exploited, Scruton says, destroying the fish stock of the North Sea and the English Channel. English law facilitates the formation of corporate persons at law to serve as trustees of public goods. The law does not require state permission to form trusts as it does in other European countries, so corporate persons have been formed to attend to any number of public causes. When businesses and local authorities polluted British rivers, anglers formed an Anglers Cooperative Association to bring collective litigation against polluters. By asserting their riparian rights as a corporate person, they helped ensure the rivers remained clean. The National Trust is another corporate person established in the late 19th century to acquire countryside and coastline to protect it from development. Eventually, it acquired country estates in order to preserve them too, precisely as a symbol of civilized settlement and making them publicly available in a way that they had not previously been. In each of these cases, public goods were preserved by the assignment of specific rights and duties to specific persons and groups over specific places in law. Their concreteness is a guarantee of their efficacy. Scruton believed that religion can threaten territorial jurisdiction by claiming to transcend it. Religious loyalty is based on loyalty to a creed rather than a tribe or territory. Members of a religion may be loyal to a universal jurisdiction instead of the territorial jurisdiction based in their nation. That, according to Scruton, was precisely the problem with England's relationship with the Roman Catholic Church. The Catholic Church claimed to have a universal jurisdiction whose head was a foreign prince. From the 12th century to the 16th, kings of England battled with popes over taxes, episcopal appointments, and whether the clergy were subject to royal or ecclesiastical courts. Tensions between the local territorial jurisdiction of the king and church in England and the universal jurisdiction of the Pope were only resolved by the Act of Supremacy in 1537. It brought jurisdiction over the country and the church together in one authority. But fighting between Protestants and Catholics continued for another century and a half, so when the Church of England consolidated its position, it consciously adopted a tolerant and flexible policy toward Protestants of various theological persuasions, although not, of course, toward Catholics. Scruton says that religion is created by man, and the Church of England is, in his words, a conscious artifact that served to domesticate religion. He says Anglicanism was based on something deeper than doctrine, namely a shared life together in a common home. Its use of the vernacular in liturgy and the translation of Scripture enriched and unified English culture, and the country church was perceived as a kind of home in which God dwelled among the English. He says that, and I quote, "Europe owes its greatness to the fact that the primary loyalties of the European people have been detached from religion and reattached to the land. Those who believe that the division of Europe into nations has been the primary cause of European wars should remember the devastating wars of religion that national loyalties finally brought to an end." So nations are more tolerant of difference than religions, according to Scruton. Nationalism, as distinct from national loyalty, is pernicious precisely because it has a religious intensity. It represents the pathology of national loyalty, not its normal condition. National loyalty has been delegitimated in part because we have mistaken it for its pathology, a pathology which has actually been quite rare. So for Scruton, our political nature is inescapably territorial and manifests itself in modern politics in the nation-state. He rehabilitates the nation by describing it as a shared home rather than something based on ethnicity or language, though it may include those things. The nation accommodates foreigners who, by a process of assimilation, go from being strangers to becoming neighbors. That's why, he says, national loyalties can nest within one another without conflict. It is possible insofar as they have a shared commitment to a shared place and way of life in a specific territory with a specific jurisdiction. Attachment to the nation as a home may be reinforced by a national religion, but for Scruton, that loyalty should be attenuated so as not to conflict with national loyalty. The nation state should be conserved then because it is the best safeguard of particular cultures in the face of globalization.